welcome to the latest edition of Loaded Balls. I'm delighted to be starting a new series, new campaign for this year. The football wise, obviously the coaching one has finished. So first up is the county, and obviously we had quite a travel to Mayo. Not the result we wanted, but we've got two brilliant guests on to dissect that and give us their analysis and thoughts. Mr. Ross, Carr, and Ciaran Brannigan. Ross, Ciaran, thanks a million, boys, for jumping on. I suppose, man, like, was this expected, Ross, or were you more? Was it more hope that you thought Down was going to get a result?
Well, firstly, John, thanks a million for the invite. Was it expected? I think you have to be, put things in perspective of where we're at. We came out of Division 3 without having to actually play the couple of games to get us out of Division 3. And we were travelling in our first game across the country to play a team that was beaten in the All-Ireland final. So I didn't think the result was going to be anything other than it was. Areas of the game that we consistently have struggled in over the last number of years were areas of the game that we struggled yesterday. And against the better teams, you probably are going to be punished more than you will be in your own division if you're at your own level. So it's disappointing because it's the first game, but I didn't see anything else coming.
Mm-hmm. Ciaran, I suppose like it was 4-4 at a stage, and Down, Mayo and Down were just going head to head, and the game was flowing nicely. The Mayo goal, the first goal, was a real sucker punch and seemed to just give Mayo more belief, and Down then just started to struggle.
Yeah, they definitely did. The game was going end to end. It was going direct. There was a lot of plays going in. I just felt that Mayo on the field, their players adapted to suit what Down were putting at them. One that stood out was Kevin McKernan put a direct diagonal ball into Corey Quinn. They'd wanted him behind. They tried that ball 2 or 3 more times, but Mayo were streetwise to that. While I found the other side of things where Mayo were adapting what Down were doing in the defence. So didn't look like the goal was coming, but it was only, they did work it till get their opportunity, and you couldn't have said, listen, it was coming, but they were definitely going to create that chance at some stage of the game, because I just thought their own game management was very, very clever yesterday, compared to what Down delivered.
Ross, just with what Ciaran's saying about adaptability, is that the difference between top teams and, as you go down the divisions, then that they can see in-game management and see what teams' tactics are, and they can change accordingly?
It is. If the top level, you have better players and you have more of them. Yesterday, I thought Corey Quinn started very, very well, but he and you do that as a forward if the ball's coming towards you properly. But once Mayo did a couple of things, then after that, they actually tightened up on Corey. So young Mullen, who excelled last year in Mayo's journey to the All-Ireland final, got to grips with him, but also they started to suffocate between the 245s, which meant that the ball going into Corey wasn't as good as it had been in the first 10 or 15 minutes. One of the challenges we face in Down is that because we play with a number of players back, I suppose the word in fashion now is transition, which always was in the game. It just means now that it seems to be more through the hands than where you would kick the ball out. But Down were ponderous at coming out. And I thought Rory Burns did well, but he's being put under a lot of pressure. So when Down kicked short, they retained it, but Mayo pushed up and everybody tackled the immediate opponent. So when the full back got the ball, somebody was tackling him, and he gave it to a cornerback, he was being tackled. Then if Burns kicked it long, because we are lacking in height, it became the best situation we could hope for was win a break ball. And then Mayo, because they're physically bigger and physically stronger, started to win those. So the supply to Corey or to Barry O'Hagan or that wasn't as good as it had been. One of the things I noticed was that the ball to Corey, it was 40-yard diagonal kicks, but a 40-yard diagonal kick is going away from goal. So even if he gets it, he's on the sideline or heading towards the sideline. Mayo, time and time again, because they were quicker coming out of defence, they looked to hit those 25, 30-yard pop passes in on the edge of the D, which meant that when they retained possession, they had runners coming off them. So it is difficult, and you know, a couple of years ago, we didn't get out of Division 3. Last year, we struggled to get out of Division 3, and we're going to play two teams that have come out of Division 1 this year, and we travel to them as well, and historically we haven't been good on the road. So I think it's going to be tough. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a very, very tough year for Down.
Mm-hmm. Here, just with the kickouts, as Ross said, whenever we were going short, they seem to be put under pressure. But you know, Down have quick players in that middle sector with Keelan Mooney, Pierce Lavery, Daniel Guinness, and that. You know, it seems to be right. Plan A is not working straight away. It's hit to the box, and it's, you know, we'll try and get the breaks. You know, I don't think the tactics working, or can you see merit in the kick-out strategy?
The kick-out strategy, I can't accept at all, and I've made that clear on numerous occasions. It goes back to the first time under new management in Donegal in the McKenna Cup. I found it out that night. I watched it, and it's still happening. But the thing that baffles me the most is that when the players approach this, the feedback is that we don't concede off our own kickouts, and I just can't get that in my head. That we were actually happy enough to keep going with that ploy because we don't concede off the kickout. Because the first kickout that we went long with yesterday, we did concede off. The Mayo got the point. The first point come off a long kick into that box. And they conceded straight away from it. Now, maybe in Division 3, whenever we weren't getting punished that much, maybe that kick out did work. Maybe not conceding off of the maybe because they were going wide, or maybe just the shot wasn't getting released. But when you're in 2, and as Ross said there, you're playing teams that come out of 1. You know, yes, it's adaptability. You have to change that up. I just find that, you know, if the teams drop off us, we'll pop it to our cornerbacks and we'll play. If they don't, they just go to and load that box, and they're comfortable at doing that. I know personally the keepers can't be happy with that. They have so much more in their locker that they can pick out passes and they can pick out personnel, because you look across, you know, you have Pierce Lavery, you've Kevin McKiernan, who are both very, very comfortable in the ball, and you're watching them yesterday, you know, they're not even looking for that ball once a team comes up on us, because they know we're going to load the box. It's a hard one to accept, that, you know, you don't want to be too mad on it, but they have to change that, you know. And the players have approached it. I know that personally, that the players have approached it, and they've been told that that's the response they're getting back. So the management are seeing stats and figures, which is grand, but I think the game's developed a lot more, that we, you know, you have to be your restarts have to be, or your kickouts have to be setting up a platform for you to set up an attack. Surely, you know, I don't think it was ever a case where you went back and just launched it out the field and it was 50-50, you know. And, you know, Ross has played with some of the best midfielders in the game, but you kicked it out to them because they could catch the ball. You know, they were comfortable of winning that ball when it went out. They could catch it, but, you know, generally it used to be kick it out, you win your own kickouts, and you try to break the oppositions. you know, I think it's moved on again where you try and retain your own kickouts as best you possibly can. Is it chipping to 2 and 4 the best answer? No, it's not. Like, you know what I mean? You try and be a wee bit more streetwise than that. But if you can get it out quicker, yes. But the kickouts does annoy me, to be fair.
Ross, obviously you've experience with managing Down as well, and you know, lost his career with Down. The kickouts for you, would you like to see more of a varied kickout other than like, if we know what's happening, surely other teams, it's the analysts are saying this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, the points that Ciaran make are very obvious to everybody, but it's a difficult situation, John, because I would say the goalkeeper maybe doesn't want to be kicking it out all the time, but if it's 70 yards away from goal, and the way we play, we will have probably 10 or 11 fellas behind the ball at that stage. So if the argument is then worst case situation, we lose a break, but we're well set up to try and defend, then, well, if that's what management want, that's what management get. The challenge we face, and it's in Down football, is that we have a lack of physical size around the middle of the field. So we don't have 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" midfielders, wing forwards who we can hit as targets to win the. So if we don't have that, then we've got to try and secure possession in some other means. We do seem to be able to retain it if it comes short, but all of the players that seem to get on the ball, so Ciaran mentioned there, Kevin, young Lavery, Mooney, Guinness, those lads, but they're all ball carriers. So as soon as they get it, it's heads down and they carry the ball. And the challenge that I would pose to them, or the question that I would pose to them, is that when they're actually carrying the ball, where do they think they're going? Like, is there a plan? So if I carry it to beat my man, what's happening after that? So even if I get past him, what's happening? What I would like to know is, what is the thought process? Because when you watched Mayo come out with the ball, and I don't want to compare Down to Mayo just because it was yesterday's game, because this isn't about Mayo, it's about us. But when Mayo's cornerbacks or halfbacks got the ball or into space from their own kickouts, because Down seemed to accept that they would just concede the kick out to Mayo going short. In most cases, Mayo seemed to carry the ball and then push it forward, whether that be with a fisted pass or a kick pass. And what that allowed runners to come off a ball 25 or 30 yards further up the pitch. When Down get the ball and solo it, they go sideways. So if you go sideways, you lose that momentum of going forward, which means that a press is easier to put on. And I can understand why we go short, but only if we then adapt to shifting the ball quickly, and we don't. Keelan solos with the ball, so you can be sure as night follows day that he's going to invite tackles. Young Guinness solos with the ball. Pierce Lavery solos with the ball. Kevin will take a couple of solos with the ball, and that's what seems to happen. We seem to pass the ball at the last option rather than the first option, and if you take the end result of that, then a ball going into Corey Quinn is probably a long kick pass, because that's the last option. And if you watch Corey Quinn playing for Mayo Bridge, I think Corey Quinn's, along with Jerome Johnson, probably the two best forwards in the county. Well, they get the ball popped in front of them on the edge of the D playing for their club. They're nearly unmarkable, because they have the pace, the physical size, physical strength, and the brain to get themselves onto that position and then either take a man on, take their own score, or offload it to runners. And unless we play to our strengths, well, then we're going to, especially the higher level we play at, I think we're going to invite more and more hard difficulty on ourselves. And we take Meath next week or next week, or the next game, sorry. Traditionally, we have found it very difficult against Meath because of their physical size. So if you were playing against Down, what would you do? You would just push up man to man, because you'd back yourself if the ball comes into the air then.
No, and that's, Ciaran, it's probably a good point that Ross makes, that whenever Mayo sort of did change their tactics and Down were coming out not at great speed, then there seems to be no options now. Obviously, we're watching it from the TV and we didn't have the full view of what was happening with the field. But Mayo just seemed to put the clamps, and as Ross said, between the 250s, and there was no easy out ball then for them. And everything was seemed to be man for man. Then they were saying, look, if you're going to go through us, you're going to have to hit a 50-50 ball here.
Yeah, well, you see when Down are travelling with the ball and they're moving forward with it, or they are going side to side. You seen me Keely Dock, for example, yesterday, early days. I don't know whether this was an example why he got taken off or not, but Kevin was maybe travelling with the ball, Johnny Flynn was travelling with the ball, and they came behind them players to get the ball again. There was no breaking that line. Now, don't get me wrong, you probably want Keely in the ball trying to create if there's a pocket of players in front of him because he's a smart player, but you're also wanting players, if you would love your 10 and 12 to be wide, so whenever they are traveling, instead of going side to side, getting that pop ball to, because as Ross said there, there's ball carries, it was a matter of just engaging, and Down are probably their own worst enemy on it, where they all travelled, and then with the half forward line coming behind you, nearly your half back line coming forward, it was a clutter mess for the whole team, and it actually helped Mayo put the press on because they clamped down in that one area, but they're smart players, these boys that are playing for Down, when you go back to their clubs, they are smart. I'm definitely not saying that or suggesting that, but I just think we could be a wee bit more smarter in the bigger picture. I think Mayo, yes, they're a lot further down the line, they're a lot more equipped than us, but we could still be causing different problems. We watched a lot of inter-county games over the weekend there, there was counties out there that are maybe not as equal to the team they were playing against, but they still caused them a lot more problems than I felt we still should have caused more problems yesterday. Did I see the result changing? No, but it was small mini goals that we needed to get yesterday. You know what I mean? And get into I thought it was Westmeath next week. Is it Meath? Is it? I thought it was Westmeath, but whoever it is, But now you're going in next week. Now you're in the process of where do you adapt now? Or do you change it up, or do you stick to what you do? Because I watched that yesterday, and yes, there seemed to be a lot of numbers behind the ball, but it didn't look like a major defensive plan. It didn't look like we had sweepers, we had cover, because O'Donoghue had the full run on Collins, Conway had the full run on Patrick Murdoch, and then O'Connor and what do you call him, Jeremy McGovern, they had a battle too. There never seemed any time when them boys run the ball that Down at extra personnel close to them, and the only time that I did see it in the first half was the long ball that went in high. Conway misjudged it, and then it ended up going out for 45 because Daniel Guinness got involved. The keeper didn't know it, and it ended up having to be saved to go out for a 45. And that was the only time that I had seen the sweeper actually coming into play and that such. So I'm still a wee bit, was it a major defensive plan yesterday, or was it a middle third one? I don't know. So I'm wondering where the result to from next week after that performance yesterday,
Well, what would be the mini goals? Sorry, Ross. What would be the mini goals that they'll be looking for there? If Ciaran's saying there, maybe the result is out of Down's reach, but should we be saying we need to go and beat Mayo, or what would be the mindset they're going into that match?
You better ask Ciaran what the mini goals are, because he's the one that brought it up. I don't know, John, what the goals were for yesterday. I don't believe for a moment that we're going I don't believe for a moment that they were going and expecting that or accepting that that would happen. Football has become very, very tactical over the past 10, 12 years, and more so even in the last 4 or 5 years. And we seem to play with more players back in our behind the ball to make it difficult for other teams. But and you can see it happening in club football as well. But sweepers are only good if everybody else does their job. You know, so one sweeper means that, well, the other team should only have one extra player in their defense if that's where they play him, or around the middle of the field if that's where they play him. But time and time again yesterday, we had Mayo players coming to receive passes and defenders were a couple of yards off them. Now, I'm not blaming the defenders solely on this, because if any inter-county forward worth of salt, if he gets a yard on a defender, well, then he'll keep that yard. But that must mean that the players out the pitch are not putting enough pressure on the ball out the pitch. So it's not one thing. It's like dominoes, you know. The end result is that a defender will get cleaned because, well, he's not tight enough or he's not good enough. And that's what it is to the public eye, or to those of us that were watching yesterday. But there has to be so much more to how that ball came through and was able to be just hit 30 yards, bounce pass in front of a forward, especially with the numbers that we have around the pitch. I probably would say, being realistic, players felt going yesterday, they're not as good as Mayo. They're no different than we are. They're human. But I would have hoped, you probably would have hoped that it might have been tighter. And given that it was only in the last, you know, I think we scored the last goal and a couple of points. It took a bad luck off a bad luck, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's a very difficult time for down football at the moment. Really difficult, because this is Tally's third year, is it? Second year,
Yes,
third
yeah.
year.
Governing team.
And I don't see where we've improved. But also too, I'm not sure where. I don't agree with you, Ciaran, entirely in that we've smart players, because I see fella over the past couple of years, not just yesterday. I wouldn't, you know, yesterday was disappointing, but I think it's only the tip of the iceberg. We seem to. I'd love to ask players, why did you make that pass? Like, if they were watching the game, why did you actually make that pass? What were you thinking when you made that pass? So if I take a short kick out and I give it back to a support runner and they push it forward, someone comes in the loop and gets it, and they'll just immediately hand pass it 2 or 3 yards. And it's nearly, I'm sort of thinking, is there not an option, a first option, to try and head up and hit a kick pass forward? And maybe there's not, because again, you're only looking at it on a screen on the TV, as yesterday was. But even in other games, you know, go back to 2019 when we were allowed to go to games, the same issues that were in 2019 are still here, irrespective of who the personnel is. And I think that's the bigger conundrum for us. How do we get out of, if we call it a defensive type of football? And I think that's unfair too, a wee bit, maybe a wee bit unfair on Tally, in that it's a defensive type football, because I presume what he's looking for is to turn the ball over and then get out with pace. But we don't. We have a ball carrier that gets out with pace. seldom do you ever see 4 and 5 players making those 50, 60, 70, 80 meter runs at full tilt in support of that ball carrier or in support of the pass that's gone forward. It looks like at times that everybody does their own wee bit, passes it on, and then somebody else does it.
Yeah.
And watching even games today, I only saw the rerun of the Armagh and Monaghan game, but that's Division 1. And we're not in Division 1. But if that's the level at what you want to go to, well then we're way off that at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ciaran, like, would have been the Cavan first half that down really, was that the closest that the game plan has worked to maximum effect? Do you think that, as Ross said, that maybe defense is not right, but you set up for runners then to come out of pace? Obviously Cavan, got the better of us that day, but would you agree with that we need to change something?
I firmly do think we needed to change something, and I totally agree on the point. I don't think we've developed and went further on any area of the aspect of the game, and it might be harsh on us to say, well, listen, we're all coaches, you know what I mean, but we all have to accept responsibility in our roles. But I just think the first half display in the Cavan game last year was something that just seemed to massively click. Every one of them players had a 9 out of 10 in the first half, but you could name, you could point to maybe half of them that never reached a 5 or 6 in the second half. And that's where the game went to. There was so much happening and got it right. Now there was a goal chance in the second half, and I think if we had took it, it was walked in. There was 2 or 3 went, and it could have been palmed into the net. If we had took it, we probably would have gone on to seal the victory in that game. But then after that, Cavan just took over, and it didn't look like Down were ever going to turn around until it. But I think a lot needs to change. Ross talked about the quick early ball in. Listen, I always had a problem with Conor McGinn. I was a huge fan with him playing for Down and playing for Brentford, and I think he's one of the best kick passers of the ball. But I remember I was always would have texted him prior to games and after games, wishing him all the best and stuff. And I always had a problem with him. Like, why was he never kicking the ball while playing for Down? And Connor's not one of these ones who will be confrontation and will give too much away. Tell you to be fair, but that was a thing. And I was going like, the man just run about, just linking play up, and it went sideways. And then he would play for Brentford on a Friday night, and he was picking 40-50 yard passes up, and there has to be some element where I'm not saying the players are told not to be given early ball in, because that would be silly of me. But if you train, if you're training training that early ball in constantly, it's the first thing you will be looking to do. I don't see Down wanting to do that. I don't see Down looking up. Like Kevin McKernan did it early doors yesterday, then 2 or 3 didn't work, and then it stopped. We just stopped doing that, and then we run the ball through the hands, and we're not physically strong enough to run the ball through herds of packs of defence whenever they do finally set up, and that's what it looked like again yesterday, So I would like us to go back early, because I still think, I totally agree with Corey Quinn. Like, if that ball goes in and he gets it, like he's equally that 1 yard ahead of every the county player. When he's a yard ahead, he'll stay a yard ahead, and he'll get you the scores, So especially when we've lost Jerome, we've lost Donal, and I see Conor Harrison's now away from the squad, so we will rely on that. But Corey will rely on early ball, and we need to change. I think we need to change that, going back to that surprise element where the ball goes in early, and then maybe get them runners off that Ross talking about, is the ball carriers. Stop them from carrying the ball so deep, and make them travel after the ball whenever it's being kicked in, and open up the legs and get at it. Because maybe we do have extremely quick players. I think you would agree on that one. We definitely have quick personnel coming through there, and especially in that middle third of the field.
Yeah, it's just how to utilize it better, probably. But Ross, I suppose the one massive plus from the match was Darnell Hagan coming back. So how much of a boost is that for not only Down football, but for Clonduff as well?
After the winter that Darren put in, it's huge. I was surprised to see him coming on, to be honest, because the game was gone, and I didn't think he was going to have, I didn't think he would make much of an impact on it. Why it was just to get him some game time. I'm not sure how much training he has done, but he's he he's 30 now, and he has picked up a couple of, while they weren't serious injuries, but for an inter-county player, with the demands on an inter-county player now, they're severe injuries, and I just hope that he's okay, and I hope that he stays okay, because he's been Down's best player now for 4 or 5 years, and he just epitomizes everything that you want in a player. I'm probably a wee bit biased because I know him, but that's what you never see him not wanting to be involved regardless of what the score is.
I suppose, Ross, is there the caliber of players in the county, do you think, that can bring Down to the next level?
At this minute in time, John, I'm not sure. We've had some really big performances probably over the last 5 or 6 years, but they've been one-off performances. Monaghan and Armagh and Uri, even the Armagh game in Uri that we lost in extra time. The first half last year against Cavan, there've been, I suppose, situations where you think we're on the right road here, but county football's not easy. For us, for everybody here, it's the elite level of our sport. So everybody has the same ability, or more or less. You will have, obviously, because you have tiers in the league, so you have more people of a higher ability in Division 1 than you have in Division 4. But everybody more or less has the same skill set, or somebody might be able to kick proficiently off left and right. Some may be able to tackle, blah. There's a series of different skills. At this minute in time, I just don't think we have enough good players. It's not that they're not putting in the effort, because obviously, looking at it, why would you put in the effort to go to training knowing that you're going to go to Castlebar and have a very difficult outing? So I don't think anybody can question the effort that the players are making, but obviously their ability is not at the level that's going to sustain a top half of Division 2, bottom half of Division 1. We're somewhere, in my opinion, between 13, 14 and maybe 20th in the and I don't say that with any great joy. It's just that if I'm looking at the team, how many of the players that we have would get into a team in the first division, and many of the players that we would have would get into the top 2 or 3 teams in the second division. So many players from Down yesterday would get into that Mayo squad or that Mayo team. And if you don't have that standard, well, then it's very easy to be critical and pick holes in the way we're playing, or pick holes in what the management doing. Because at the end of the day, whether I think Tally's doing a good job or not, he's only working with what he has. Is there more in what he has? That's the question that we have to, that I suppose that's the question that has to be answered. Are they playing at the best level that they can play? And without being in the camp and knowing what's going on, and what style of football they're playing or what training they're doing. I don't know. I can't answer that. But I do know that the style of football that they're playing now, they're always going to find it difficult to win games.
No, I see your point. And Ciaran, do you think that there is, as Ross was saying there, is the quality in Down? Like, have we got players consistently that can play 8 out of 10, even not looking 9 or 10s, but 8 out of 10 every single game, every single season?
Personally, I think we're a lot better than we're showing. That's me being totally honest with it. We look back and we were playing this sort of style in Division 3. You know, I mean, we were playing this, and we didn't have to finish the games out to get out of 3. I still remember we went down and I went to games in Newry and stuff and watched them and sitting back and inviting a lot of pressure on when I didn't feel we needed to, you know what I mean? But listen, I personally think, but I also think I'm also realistic to say, you know, what is the next step? What Down getting to the next step? What is that next step you're talking about? Is it going to Division 1? I don't think we're good enough to go to Division 1, no. But are we good enough to be mixing it in there and in Division 2 and staying in Division 2? I think there's enough personnel within the county to be able to do that. But with that, with what we're producing and the style of football that we're playing over the past number of years, I don't see that happening. You know what I mean? I don't see us going. We'll win enough games to keep ticking over, but we'll not win enough games to go forward with it. You know, and that's I just don't like what I'm seeing over the past number of years, and I'm not going to change my view on that.
Ross, like, you came into the Down team in the late 80s, was it? And believe you were a half back then, and then obviously you just got success in the 90s. But how, whenever you joined the panel, did you think that you could win an All-Ireland?
To answer your question, John, I'm not sure. I came in 83, I think, and Down had won a National League the year before, had won the Ulster Championship in 81, had won the Ulster Championship in 78. There was still a legacy from the 68 squad. They were playing Division 1 National League football. So if there wasn't a goal of winning an All-Ireland, I definitely thought we could win an Ulster title.
Mm-hmm.
That confidence probably grew as we got through the 80s, because we were making the knockout stages of National League. We were getting to quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals in the National League then, but it wasn't divisional. So back then, the top 2 teams in each division went to quarterfinals, then semi-finals, then finals. So Down were participating in National League semi-finals and finals. They were participating in Ulster finals without winning them, and Ulster semi-finals. So I probably felt that we have a chance there. But also back then, minor teams were winning Ulster titles and All-Irelands. Under 21 teams were winning Ulster titles. They might not been winning All-Irelands, but they were winning Ulster titles and getting out. So schools were winning. Down schools were winning McCrory Cups, Hogan Cups, and the secondary schools were winning provincial and All-Irelands in that division, and it was all the A division of those competitions. It wasn't like a B division or a C division. So when I was playing for Down, St. Coleman's, the Abbey, St. Mark's, St. Malachy's, the Red High were all winning A college grade competitions. They were all, then fellas were going to university. St. Jordanstown, St. Mary's, Queens were winning Sigersons, and they were being backboned by Down players, or players from Down, which meant that eventually that caliber was coming through to a Down senior squad, which meant that you had people coming onto the squad that had All-Ireland medals at some level within an A grade competition. The challenge that anybody faces in Down that takes the senior team at the minute is that, or I think the challenge, it's only my opinion, is that we haven't won an underage provincial title since, I think, 2008 or 2009, when Pete had the under-21s. We haven't won an underage All-Ireland since 2005. Yeah, we haven't won an underage minor title, a provincial title, since that was the last year. We don't even think we won it that year in 2005. I think Armagh beat us in the final, and then there was a back door, so they progressed. So it could be 99 since they won the All-Ireland. So we've won a couple of Hogans in 2010, 2007 or 8 with Kevin, 2010 or 11 with St. Coleman's. Most of the if college teams, if you look at the university teams that won recently, Down players weren't populating those teams. Those teams were populated by Derry, Tyrone, Armagh. So the standard of player coming through is not of the same standard. They don't have any less desire to play, but they're just not, in my opinion, at the same level. So a senior county manager only has what he's given. There's no transfer system apart from Rostrevor to Downpatrick, but there's no transfer system for us as a county. So at this minute in time, the team that I came on to, or that era that I came on to, was backboned by fellas who had won All Irelands, had won All Stars, had won Club All Irelands, had won All Irelands at Sigerson, had won All Irelands at McCrory or Hogan level, and then they came on and made us better. So I probably from the late 80s onwards, I felt, if we don't win something, it's not because we don't have the ability. Mm-hmm. It'll be because we're not applying ourselves properly. Here, in the current situation, in the defensive Down, I don't think it's because they're not applying themselves. I just don't know if we have enough good players.
Yeah, I suppose that it's as Ross says, it's true, but the schools not there, and the Sigersons and all that Down is lacking in them teams as well.
Well, John, if you take St. Mark's at the minute, and when we were growing up, and up until even maybe 15 years ago, St. Mark's were winning All Irelands at A grade. I think St. Mark's are playing in the C grade of Ulster College or Ulster schools now. That to me is incredible, given that most of the feeder clubs going into St. Mark's are what is known as the powerhouses of Down football. So that's Warrenpoint, Bourne, Rostrevor, Mayo Bridge, Clonduff. So that's an indictment then on the underage setups in those clubs if St. Mark's are at C grade, because it has maybe their net has been cast a wee bit wider, but not an awful lot. St. Malachy's are not playing in A grade. I think St. Louis came up when Cahill had them to play in McCrory, but they're back down now. They're not in A grade. Red High's not in A grade. So the feeder schools to down underage are playing at a lower level, which means that when we come to county representation, they're just not going to be as good. For whatever reason. I think the issue or the challenge in down is much greater than just dissecting yesterday's match without saying that we made some big errors yesterday, or there's areas that there's areas there that have to be and can be improved on. So there's 2 new management teams in with our under 17s and under 20s, and the challenge for those guys is to start getting a conveyor belt again of players who are able to win or compete at senior level. And I think and it is probably for wider discussion, John, but we need to make sure that we're also picking the right type of player to play county football. Like, it's just not about ability. If it was only about ability, anybody, most people could play. There's an awful lot more goes into it than just ability. And
what is that, Ross? So what for you? What is it? What is the down football? Then
I think they have to leave the ego at the door. And I don't know any of these lads, apart from the couple of Clonduff lads that are on the county panel. They have to leave the ego at the door because they're coming from a club situation in which they're the best player. That's why they get playing at. But if you're that good, you should be able to adapt. So you should be able to say, well, my strengths that get me here, I might have to think differently. I might have to play in a different position. I may have to do work that I don't usually do when I'm playing from a club. But if it's for the betterment of the group, well, then I'm prepared to do that. They should also be decent fellas, and I think that's sometimes overlooked when you're picking a player to represent, because that player's representing everybody in Down, and it has to be the right type of player. He has to be made of the right stuff, so the right character. Nothing wrong with being confident and because you need that sort of stuff. Once you cross that white line, you need to be seriously confident in your own ability. But you need to be also humble enough to know that, and these are old-fashioned words, and I accept that, but you still need to be humble enough to know that you're lucky enough to play for Down, and not that you're doing Down the favour. And I just feel at times over the last number of years, fellas are picking and choosing whether they'll go to Down or not. And I could never get my head around that. And I'm sure you grew up in a club, John, and your dad got right. They were steeped in the GA. Like, he would have been as proud as punch had you pulled on a Down senior jersey.
But you never picked me, Ross, so that's why I was just asking.
John, I didn't know what club you were going to be playing for then. You had to have a club. So I wasn't sure where you were going. I sent a couple of boys to watch you, but they got lost trying to follow you.
I'm sure, Ciaran, there you can feel Ross's passion for Down out there, but Ross and Roy Keane be a good mix on a night out, wouldn't it? There'd be some. I tell you, John, he's a poor drinker of whiskey.
No. On the note there, like, just what Ross was saying, like, I played under Pete for maybe 6 years, and Pete would have echoed them words quite a number of times throughout the week, you know what I mean? And like Ross said, I'm in a different era in coaching terms, but anywhere I've been, like my main thing is you must do your role, your job first and foremost. And the second biggest thing, and probably it should be equally to the first one, is basic skills. You know, I don't try and complicate the thing, and people change it up. You know, basic skills. You know, I get as much ball contact in the boys as much as I possibly can because, and I always remember that stuck with me from playing with Pete, and you know, where it basically was your handling ability, you know, your decision making, your passing to the, you know, the thing that like you watch now, like how many times do you see a boy hand passing the ball and it's not to the boy's chest, it's to the ground, it's above him, you know, and you're going to yourself, like that's stuff that you've been sent when Michael Hanley, God rest him, when we were under sixes, that's the first thing you done, out round a cone and pass it back to the chest. And you know, he always would have made sure you're doing that. And I think the further you get up and after minor level and the senior level, people tend to forget that, but it's the basic skills that are still the most important things in the game, you know. And probably the reason I home on it so much is because I'm sitting here now without a senior championship medal, but in 2010 you're entering injury time against Bourne, and two basic skills, one picked off the ground and another man over carried the ball, and we get beat by a point against Bourne, and I was one of them people that made one of them two mistakes, you know. And you know, and that's something that still haunts me, and that's where I'll still deliver that. And I think, you know, it's still
I bet you I could guess which one.
We'll leave it at that one. Yeah, but you know, that's the thing that it really eats me, and I still try and do it, and I still think it has to be done in today's game. Like, you know, looking back yesterday, and you know, even over, and that's not just down, I'm talking throughout, the basic skills at intercounty level is questionable at times. You know what I mean? And like, you go to club games and you say, you know, okay, but you don't expect it from your bigger players. But sometimes you're watching there at inter-county football and you go, no, that shouldn't be happening. You know, it wouldn't have happened on games gone by, you know. And not, listen, there's all the transitions, and Ross says it's been in the game well before. Like, you know, you hear all them soccer pundits too saying, well, we done that, we just didn't call it that because it was called work. You know what I mean? That's it. But now the fancy words for it, you know. And I messed up early in this podcast. I said restarts, and Ross was looking. So to go, you know, it's just different words. It's just somebody find a wee different word for it, and you know, that's the only thing that's changed. The ball's still a size 5. You catch it, you 4 steps, and you have to play it, you know, either way, you know. So I think we can still keep improving on that element, you know.
Just the last couple of questions, boys, and just while we've got this on here. Ross, how difficult is it to bring your club form into the county then, and you know, or vice versa? You're not having good year with the club, but you know,
yeah, that's a really good question, John, because I think when you're selected, obviously, you're selected for the county on your club form. So obviously you're doing a lot of things right, and you're probably starring for your club. You touched on a word there, or a phrase earlier on, where it's very, very seldom will players ever have a 9 out of 10. You know, that if you even think about that, that's 90% doing everything right, or 100%, and that's usually anybody that has never made a mistake in a game is usually a sub. They're not going to take part. But if you can get people consistently playing, and I don't like, you know, I hit those grades when you used to lift the paper on a Monday and you would have seen out of 10, because that's a journalist's opinion that has no idea what that guy's role was, unless it was a forward and a full back, and the forward comes off and he scored 110 and he gets an 8, and the defender has a 4 or a 5, and I'm thinking, well, Jesus, that defender did well if his immediate opponent did that damage. So if you have somebody who's consistently at about putting in 6, 7 out of 10 performances, that usually gets them to the noticed by a county management team, or people will start talking about him. And to get onto the county team, you're either, if you're a defender, you're doing a couple of things. You're holding your man scoreless, or restricting them, or winning a race to the ball, or forcing a defender in, or a forward into mistakes. And you're also then, in today's game, you're able to get out with the ball and give a good first pass and support the play. If you're a midfielder, then you're able to usually dominate in the air, or be a link between defence and a forward line, and which is crucial in today's game. And all the top teams seem to have it as a scoring midfielder, or a midfield that scores, either one or both of them. And then if you're a forward, well, you're usually a ball winner and a scorer. So that's what usually gets you onto a county panel. If you get onto the county panel, you may be played in a position that you don't fulfill in your club team. So you could play midfield in your club team, or centre half forward in your club team, or centre half back in your club team, and all of a sudden you're cornerback, wing forward, corner forward, or somewhere else, asking to do a different role. You still have the same skill set that you had to get on there. You just have to work it out, and through consultation with your coaches now, what exactly are you being asked to do? But if you're a scoring midfielder and you have that natural athleticism and ball winning ability, in today's game, you should be able to play anywhere from 5 to 12, which means that your role really hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would still expect you to chip in with another score, chip in with the odd score, or make tackles, or win the ball, or track runners. And I think when we adopt tactics where we play so many people behind the ball, then, not confusion, I would say there's maybe a complacency, and it's not meant, but a complacency sets in that, well, I don't have to do that work. We have enough people behind the ball, so somebody else will do it. But if we play with one sweeper and everybody else does their work, then if you and I line out at the start of a match, then I should be responsible for you, or you for me, until management decides otherwise. So if you get the ball, I still should be the first person to put pressure or make contact with you. They're the things that I think what a good club player who makes a county squad should be able to do, and should be able to work out for himself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest, I think that's the question that I have most now, is that, are players adaptable within a game? So we go out with if we go out with a set of say tactics or instructions, and those tactics or instructions can last for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 50 minutes. But what happens if something happens within that first 10 minutes that changes that? Are you able to adapt? So do you have the game sense to be able to say, well, I didn't plan to be marking him. I didn't plan for him to be marking me. I now have got to pose him a different set of challenges, or I've got to deal with a different challenge from him. And the earliest you can have a break in a game now is the first quarter, and it still seems so. For 15 minutes, you've got to play within that game, knowing what else is happening within the game, if that makes sense. Yeah. You know, so if you're playing corner forward and the wing forward in front of you is getting a difficult time with a wing back, or you're getting a difficult time with a cornerback, where can you take him on the pitch that you can get into the game? And it might only be getting your hands on the ball and laying it off. And sometimes today, when I look at some of our down players, is that I wonder, are they actually thinking about how am I going to get into this game, or where am I going to make a run to that will get me ending up in the position I want to end up in? So I might have to make 3 or 4 different runs to actually get into the position they want to be in. All our runs now seem to be just, I want the ball here, so I'm running. It's never a secondary run. And you touched on the start of this, on the start of the program about young or during the program about Donal O'Hare. If you ever watch Donal O'Hare playing for Burn or for that, he runs that 14, 21 yard line. He nearly tires out the defender before he gets the ball. And that's the sort of running that I'm not too sure. Do we do enough now? Because we're not blessed with 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" forwards who are going to win the ball above their head.
No, I know. And I suppose, Ken, that runs that he said there about that Donal does, like whenever you used to do the runs, you used to tire yourself out. But whenever it is as a coach, then how would you get a player back on form then who's had a bad game? Obviously, down boys need picked up now.
Yeah.
So Ciaran, how would you go about and lift them now?
Well, it's a tough one. How do you go about lifting that now? It's now we have to be realistic. It wasn't good going into yesterday. The feedback coming out of camp wasn't good going in, so we need to get it stopped.
Ciaran, you must have some contacts within that camp, like. You must have some contacts within that camp. I'm getting hearing stuff now I never heard before in my life.
Well, they get badly beat against Tyrone last Wednesday night or last Thursday night. By 18 or 19 points. You know what I mean? It was in a.
I'm hearing. I've got different sources. I heard 6 points. So there you go. People, I know nothing.
I didn't even know there was a game.
Yeah, yeah. So then they're out yesterday, and that happened. The dangerous thing now is they could change something. They could try and do something completely different that they've tried to get together over this period of time. They have to just accept that it didn't work yesterday. They were playing the second best team in Ireland and given on last year's All-Ireland semi-final or Ireland final. So they stick and maybe make a few changes to try and stick to the game plan works next week. I don't think there's going to be major changes that they can do this week, but how to pick them up, you get back into training, you get the enjoyment levels up, but the enjoyment has to be winning. You know what I mean? So you can't just go back in and, you're not going to have to pick a friendly game this week and try and get morale back up. It's going to have to be back in through hard work. And Ross touched on an individual earlier where, look at yourself in the mirror and get it right. The players bouncing back on Monday evening or whatever, they're back training, saying what they done wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? And, the management will probably be doing the same thing themselves. They should be anyway, so everybody's come back and saying, right, that wasn't good enough. We need to gain maybe you're talking percentages, you're talking maybe 50% needs to up to be competing next week, so get the ball in hand and work to what their strengths are, so how to lift them, it's just the players will have to lift themselves, in terms of getting in around it. Quick bit of video analysis and probably back at it, shoulder to the wheel stuff. That's all you could really do. I don't think I don't see anything. I can't give you any one that's going to change boys this week to say, listen, this is how we're going to pick it up.
Well, Ross, will they change the personnel, do you think, to give boys more game time? Obviously, the Donegal game is like we have to win in Division 2 to stay in it, obviously. But the Donegal one with the championship, obviously no back door. So one game, you lose, you're out. Is the shadow of Donegal looming large as well with personnel selection? Do you think? I seen Barry O'Hagan starting like at number 14 rather than wing forward, or is that just the case of we're missing Donal O'Hare stepped away from the panel, Jerome Johnson stepped away from the panel and that as well?
Yeah, I suppose. Well, yesterday the substitutions, I presume the only one that I knew was maybe forced was looking at it was young Doherty. He seemed to take a very heavy knock.
He did, yeah,
Just, and probably didn't feel 100% then at halftime and was replaced. The other substitutions just seemed to, be through the game itself. The difficulty I have in answering that, John, is I'm not 100% sure what the fitness levels are of players that are there and weren't playing. So the likes of young Donnelly, Owen Donnelly from, or Niall Donnelly from Tullish, I don't know if he's fit or what the situation is, but a couple of years ago, he did really well for us along with Turley in the middle of the field. He was big and athletic and incredibly competitive. I think we need to find somebody that, if we're going to lump the ball out to, if Rory's going to have to kick the ball long, we need somebody there that can compete when the ball comes out. And if then he doesn't win it clean, we need fellas who can get in around for the break. If we're going to kick it short and stay with that, well, then we need to be able to devise some way that we can get out quicker. But Ciaran pointed out that's a challenge we've had now for a while. So the personnel, people that came on yesterday, the young lad McCabe came on from Carryduff. I thought he was doing quite well when he came into the panel a couple of years ago. He got a very nasty injury against Mayo and Uri that night that probably set his confidence back a bit. James Guinness looked okay at times yesterday. His pace, he seems to be comfortable on the ball. He needs to be more assured, or his decision making on shot selection. He seems to shoot from areas that he's maybe outside of his range. Not to say that he can't shoot, for he picked off a lovely score yesterday, but he seems to be pacey but he lined out with 14 on his back, I think, and seemed to play in that role behind the midfield and used as a player to get out with the ball. So the challenge, one of the big challenges I think we face is that when we pick six forwards to play, so whatever six forwards we pick to play, we immediately withdraw three of them. So all of a sudden, before the game starts, you know that your strike force has been reduced by 50%. We don't have midfielders that score. So we're dependent on three of our forwards to do the bulk of our scoring, and then maybe with runners coming from deep. So Mooney, James Guinness, Daniel Guinness, Ciaran mentioned young Laverty, some other guys like that. They have to come through. But if you look across the scoring charts now, like when I talk about the difference in league football from when I was playing, matches could have been won 7-6, 8-7. Now you literally need to be scoring 15, 16, 17 times to win a game. And when do we hit those marks? And I'm not talking about 17 points. I'm talking about scoring 17 times. So 116, 215, that type of scoreline. If we are going to withdraw 50% of our strike force straight away to play in a different area of the pitch that are not a scoring threat, and our midfield, we play with a midfield that don't have a scoring threat, and we have three half-backs who are not a scoring threat. So where do all our scores come from? Even if Corey Quinn had a marquee game and scored not 4 from play, and Barry O'Hagan scored not 3 or not 4 from play, and you chip in I don't know, many frees, 3, 4, 5 frees, we're still only at 12 or 13 points. So where will we've got to devise some plan, and it's great, you know, this is Paddy Talley and his management team's job. That's what he's been asked to do, is to win, to make Down competitive a game. If not win, at least improve them. And improvement for us is to retain our Division 2 status. And to retain our Division 2 status, we've got to score more and concede less. So how do we do that with the group of players that we have? Do you think there are players on the panel there that could be used for the next game? I don't know. Like, obviously yourself and Ciaran, and I'm not putting the responsibility on you, but you probably are more aware of what's there at the minute than I am.
I love the way you're trying to shift the emphasis onto me, Ross. Thanks for that.
Not at all, John. Not at all.
Ciaran, you launch it. Is there any, just even for your own personal, you know,
Ciaran, John, ask Ciaran what the team is for next game, will you?
Yeah.
But is there any or players with different roles or anything like that there as well, Ciaran, that you think could be of benefit? Because obviously it's a must win then the next game, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, it is must win. Yeah, well, Liam Carr come on, done well yesterday. I thought he travelled with the ball pretty well. Can get you out of there. There's Paul Devlin. There was a chance that James Guinness had a free early in the first half. Now, did it have a huge burn in the game? But it would have kept us within a point at that stage. He pulled it wide. It wasn't that difficult. It was only tip of the D. You know, on a good left-footed side. You know, Paul Devlin doesn't miss them. You know, not that Paul Devlin has a lot more to offer in the game. So it's not as if we're carrying a free taker, but you know, we can't afford to miss them as we go forward. You know, Liam Kerr, Steve McConville done well yesterday when he come on. You know, there is options there, you know, but it is you know, the 50% of losing the forward line. You know, it was even, I think it was maybe more than that yesterday. We played maybe with 2 at times. Maybe Corey was left on his own, and it is worrying. You know, when you look at it, when Ross broke it down there, and we talked about, whenever I looked at the team that I've wrote down in front of me here, it's, you know, there only is Corey is the real out and out scorer. Even when you go back to club football, like Keely Doherty doesn't. Sorry, Barry O'Hagan, I'm telling lies in that one. He scores a lot for Clonduff, like, you know what I mean. But you go through the rest of them, you know, they're all ball players for their own clubs and stuff. You know what I mean. So it is worrying. Do we need much change? I do. With Darren O'Hagan, as he played a part, Ross has said he was surprised to see him. So is he going to play more of a role next week? Is Benny McYardle going to come back in for experience early doors next week instead of getting the run out he did yesterday? Them things will have to be worked out between them. You know what I mean? But I still think it's a huge week ahead. And I would love to be listening to the show next week and people with different opinions on how they perform next week. You know what I mean? I would love to see it. There's nothing nice about going down and heavy on hard of the way things are going and on what happened yesterday and what has been happening. But I would love to see it change. Listen, if we're allowed back in next week and it was the bottom end of Ireland, I would still be the first one there, you know, whether I like it or not. But I still think we've enough to win next week, you know, but it will take a much stronger and better performance from nearly all individuals.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is if you come on next week, and I'll get someone else on as well to join us, just to see how, you know, the different views are, if that's all right with yourselves, if you can come on.
Grand,
Yeah.
John, sure. Yeah.
Good stuff. Because then I was just thinking there that at least we can be consistent then, and then have another person then to come on with see how they've thought the last 2 games have gone. But boys, as I said, you know, there's bigger issues as well that hopefully we will be covering in the upcoming weeks, months, or whatever. But we're also moving to a subscription as well in the coming while as well with the podcast. So exciting news with that. We're also starting our own TV show, and that will be in the pipeline as well. Joint force with Conrad Madden from Warren Point there, so he's coming on board. So it's all go with the Load of Balls podcast and TV show. So Thanks very much, men, for coming on tonight. And you know, as I say, you know, we are all Down supporters. You know, we don't doubt the lads' effort and integrity. We just want the best for Down football. And it's, you know, as Ciaran said there, it's not easy, you know, whenever a bad defeat not there. But it's our only your opinions. I'm only the show host. So if there's any grief, please contact Ciaran and Ross. Lads, thanks a million, and see you next week then.
Good luck, John. Thank you.
All the best.
See you. Bye.